University of Maryland, Baltimore County. A typical college campus. People in an academic environment. An environment that appears to be insulated from the real world. I'm Patricia Lanoux. College campuses are not insulated from the real world. In many ways, they are a mirror of the real world, reflecting both the positive and the negative sides, including crime. In fact, recent FBI data shows that reported campus crime has increased over the last 10 years, especially crimes against women. We have put together an investigative report which presents a profile of this type of crime, from the seemingly harmless person who exposes himself to women to the pathologic criminal who abducts women. Who are these criminals? Is there anything that can be done to stop them? What can you do if it happens to you or someone you care about? Scott Weber will join us now to present our report.
Pat, the first answer is that you can't tell who the criminals might be. It could be anyone, a casual acquaintance or a total stranger. College environments don't keep out the bad guys, but there is a naive attitude that there are no bad guys on campus. And that's part of the answer to the second question. What can you do to stop them? Most victims are too trusting, and that gets them into dangerous situations. That doesn't mean that the responsibility lies with the victims. It does mean that you need to be aware of the potential dangers. In other words, be more street smart. That's the advice of the law enforcement experts I spoke with. We also thought it would be helpful to present dramatizations taken from actual police files, which we can use to analyze and evaluate how these crimes might have been prevented. Our first dramatization takes place in a woman's public restroom on a college campus, where the victim enters one of the private stalls. She never expected the events that followed. How would you feel if this happened to you?
Listen, I know you. You'll have that psych test sewed up by midnight tonight.
I hope so. I'd love to be able to get some sleep tonight.
Well, listen, I know you'll do fine. Let me know what happens, though. I gotta run this way, and I mean run. I'll see ya. Sorry.
Two students returning to the dorm after seeing a movie. The young woman trusting that her date is someone who will not harm her. Someone who respects her as a friend. Perhaps she is too trusting.
Guess who called me the other day?
Who?
Connie.
Connie.
I know, wow. It's been a long time, hasn't it?
About a half semester ago, I've seen her.
Yeah, but still I miss her.
What's she doing in college?
Oh, she's doing pretty well, she said. But she's home. She didn't call me from school. She came home for the weekend.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she thought it might look to see her, you know.
What, her and, John? She going out or something?
Yeah, she's done.
Connie, she was always a waste of money, I thought.
No, she wasn't.
Yeah, well, you know, but I like her. She's a nice girl.
Yeah.
I say that. And put the, down here so that get too radical here.
Mike, stop. Come on. Mike. Stop.
Stop what?
You know what I mean, Mike. Stop it.
I don't know what you mean. You know, this isn't a first date.
I know that, Mike.
I've been dating for a while now. It's not like, I just met you yesterday or tonight. You don't trust me. I don't understand.
Yeah, I trust you, Mike, but I'm not ready
But
yet.
you wouldn't care.
Mike, we talked
If you
about
trust
this.
me, look,
Mike,
there's
come
no,
on, Mike, we
no
go.
reason.
Mike!
Well, you don't.
Mike!
What? Relax. Relax.
Come on, Mike, stop! Mike!
Our final incident dramatizes what happened when a student thought nothing of stopping along a dark campus road, alone.
I have to stop at the store, but I should be there in about 10 minutes or so. Okay. Yeah, okay. All right. See ya.
Excuse me, could you tell me how to get to Paradise Avenue?
Yeah, right around back there to your left.
Well, look, I'm not from around here. Maybe you can help me out. Could you write it down for me?
Sure.
Come back here. Back here. See this gun? It's for you, girl. Now, come on, come on. Hey, hey, quiet, quiet.
Campuses like this one appear to be peaceful and safe. But as we've learned from these dramatizations, appearances may be deceiving. And according to our experts, that's part of the problem. Captain Bob Oatman with the Baltimore County Police Department is an expert in hostage negotiations. He has worked closely with campus police on several occasions when a campus crime extended into his jurisdiction. Captain Oatman, what are the different motivating factors involved with an abduction?
Scott, that's a very broad question, but to give you some indication, what we see here is an individual who has progressed. He's now in possession of a handgun. He's approached a young lady who he knows is alone in an automobile, gone up to the doorway to ask directions, which is more or less a rube. He then takes the weapon and he's forced himself into the car. We could be dealing anywhere from an assault to a rape, and even worse, rape and homicide.
The first criminal we saw, could this individual have wound up committing a crime as serious as an abduction?
Oh, I certainly believe so. Again, we shrug those kind of crimes off as being just petty in nature. But you have an individual who's willing to extend out and be involved anywhere from indecent exposure to flashing that people find to be humorous. We don't, because it can be as serious as this.
What steps can the individual take to prevent an abduction from occurring?
You have to study your environment. You have to be aware of the dangers around you at all times, especially in a situation such as this. She was in a hurry, she made a phone call, and from that point in time, she was alone.
The dramatizations you have just seen are actual incidents taken from campus police files. From what we have seen, it certainly appears that campus crime is no different from crime anywhere else. Here again is Captain Bob Oatman, with whom we discussed the abduction incident. And joining us is Captain Greg Repke of the University of Maryland, Baltimore County Police Department.
On a regular basis, we compare police statistics between the campus and that of the precincts here in Baltimore County. And there's a very, very close similarity. Robbery, rape, sexual crimes, assaults, there's no difference.
What responsibility does the college community at large have for campus crime?
The people that live in the campus community somehow think it's a sanctuary, and they really shouldn't be thinking that. It is disturbing to us on the campus that many of the people who come here come onto the campus thinking that there is no crime, and there is crime. Crime does not stop at the gates of the campus.
I think just as important, report all crimes. Sometimes so many of us sit back and say, well, it was a minor infraction. I don't want to bother the police. Call us, let us know, and that way we can keep a very close pulse on the crime, either in the campus or in the community it surrounds.
Thank you, Scott. That was a very informative report. You really uncovered some key issues concerning campus crime. The most important one being that a false sense of security makes people more vulnerable to crime.
So the first step in preventing campus crime is to be aware that it does exist.
And the second step is to use common sense. Don't put yourself in vulnerable situations. And finally, if you don't report a crime, criminals can't be caught. The safety of your campus is really up to you.
be seated. Our program will begin in 1 minute.
Okay, welcome back, and let's resume with today's topic, officer safety. Our panelists are Sean Gremin, John Gray, Gordon McNeil, Bob Gallagher. Okay, just before the break, we were talking with Gordon McNeil, who was relating the situation that he was involved with on April 11th, 1986 in Miami. And we're going to give you an opportunity to ask some more questions a little bit later in the program, but first I want to go back to you, Gordon, and ask you if you can tell us your function after you were critically wounded, how you functioned in that particular situation, and then a little bit about what you think organizations can do with individuals who've been involved in situations like this. So go ahead, Gordon.
Well, as I indicated, Les, Grogan and Dove were now in closely behind the subject vehicle, and the subject had slowed their car down now to about 5 miles an hour. So for the next 2 or 3 minutes, they were traveling at a rate of 5 miles an hour, made a series of right-hand turns. And now we had more FBI cars up on the scene. Grogan and Dove were joined by 4 other FBI cars, including myself. Coincidentally, I happened to be coming from the opposite direction, and I passed the subject. They were going 5 miles an hour. I was going 5 miles an hour in the opposite direction. I looked right in the driver's face, and I could tell by the look on his face that he wasn't scared of me. He knew who I was. I then observed the passenger. He had a long-barreled weapon in his hand, a Ruger Mini 14, and he was putting a clip into the Mini 14. I advised all the agents at that particular time. The subject was loading up a long-barreled weapon. He looked like he was getting ready to go right there. The shootout would ensue right there. At that time, we were 1/2 block off the most heavily traveled thoroughfare in South Florida, South Dixie Highway, U.S. number 1. Also, at that particular time, the subject suddenly sped up their vehicle, made an abrupt left-hand turn. I realized that if they got out onto the crowded highway, knowing their propensity for violence, there was at least an excellent opportunity or a chance that there would be a significant number of civilian casualties. A series of collisions occurred between FBI vehicles and the subject vehicle. We had the sirens going, we had the blue lights going, and so forth. And finally, the subject ended up against a tree, being stopped by an FBI vehicle. Over the next 4.5 minutes, over 140 rounds were fired, approximately 60 by the subjects and approximately 80 by the FBI agents. It's interesting to note that one subject only fired 1 round, a shotgun round, and the other subject was good for approximately 59 rounds, primarily all from the Ruger Mini 14. It's interesting to note that prior to the 2 agents being killed, Ben Grogan and Jerry Dove, we had already hit the subject with the Mini 14. We had already hit him 9 times. 2 of those wounds were non-survivable wounds. He would not have survived from 2 of the hits that he received. The subject did something extremely unusual, something I had never run into before. I know in law enforcement you always have to expect the unexpected. But the subject, who had 9 rounds in him, advanced on our position, laying down suppression fire, and surprised the 3 agents behind the car and killed 2 of them. Myself, I had been hit with 4 rounds, 2 superficially, 1 on the side of the head, 1 in the ear. He had put a round into my right hand, which basically disabled my right hand completely, my shooting hand. That was my strong hand. And the devastating round was the .223 round that hit me in the side of the neck, powdered into approximately 60 pieces and traversed down off my spinal cord across my chest and back. This situation basically left me totally paralyzed for approximately the next 3 to 4 hours. But it was rather interesting. I did feel no particular pain at that particular time. I truly believed I was dying. I knew I was losing a tremendous amount of blood. I saw Dove get shot right in front of me, died right in front of me. Grogan went down right in front of me. I saw Ed Morales, one of the other agents, his arm, a tremendous flow of blood from his left arm from taking a direct 223 hit on his arm. I did, though, however, have a clear recollection of all the events that were going on around me. It is interesting to note that all the law enforcement personnel, all the FBI agents at that particular time were in brilliant sunshine. The subjects were wearing dark clothing, and they were under two very large shade trees, so picking up the target and identification of the target became very, very difficult. There was so much smoke out there, it was difficult to see. There was so much noise, especially the psychologically devastating sound of the Ruger Mini 14 that Platt was firing. My emotions at that particular time, what were they? They were anger, depression, recognizing we had finally tracked down these two individuals, and with a tremendous amount of good luck, we had now taken a heavy toll, and I believed that there was at least a possibility that it could escape at that particular time. And my depression was extremely heavy because I felt that we had lost. I knew we had at least two agents dead, and that the two bad guys had won. But really what it comes down to in a situation like that is you can't quit, you can't give up. I didn't want to die. I could at least function to some degree and give my observations, yell my observations, things that I saw as far as the subject's movements and so forth, to the other agents who were still able to operate. Quick point on post-shooting investigation. Our particular incident in Miami was handled in an excellent fashion. It was apparent that the agents who did the investigation had a depth of investigative experience. They brought sensitivity and objectivity to the investigation. And considering the fragile emotions of all the people involved, considering the loss of two of our fellow agents. I always tell people who go out to investigate shooting incidents that you got to put yourself in the other man's place, that you have to walk a mile in his shoes and understand what he was going through at that particular time of extreme trauma. What can organizations do to support, and what logical steps can you take to deal with personnel who are involved in critical incidents? I received a tremendous number of phone calls of support, and also my family and the other agents' families of the wounded agents and the deceased agents. Phone calls from police departments all over the country, giving support and offering assistance to the agents and their families. They dispatched an employee benefits expert from our headquarters in Washington who came down and handled all the financial side of the post-shooting trauma. The health insurance, the workman's compensation considerations. I was out of work for 10.5 months after my injuries and was taken back on a regular basis. They didn't forget about me in the office. They were taking me back and forth to the hospital for visits. They were taking me back and forth to my doctors for a number of visits. We also received a tremendous amount of psychological support. Those services were offered not only to the agents involved, because as I've said on many occasions, that you didn't have to get shot out there on that particular day to suffer the emotional fallout that so many people did, not only in Miami, but around the entire FBI family, and all police departments also felt the emotion and the trauma that we experienced there. It's interesting that I had the opportunity to go up to Secret Service headquarters in Washington and speak to them concerning our particular incident. And it's kind of a big surprise on that particular day. They took us in to see in the Oval Office the President of the United States, Ronald Reagan. And Mr. Reagan, after he was briefed on the incident and what had occurred, and he thanked us for coming up to share our experience with Secret Service, he looked at me and he said, "I want you gentlemen to know that you have made my day." And I told him, I said, "Mr. President, if you think we've made your day, sir, you have no idea how we feel." Returning to work after a critical situation like this, what should supervisors and managers do to ensure a smooth transition back to work for personnel that are involved in these traumatic situations? If you're still able to do the job, you must go back to work. You must get on with your life. You must get on with your career. Everyone, however, must be assessed individually. Some people just handle it better than others. Just because of a traumatic incident doesn't mean you can't return to work, and it doesn't mean you can't still be effective out on the street. If a period of restrictive duties is necessary, it should be assigned, because the officer in some cases has to reconquer the fear and anxiety he experienced during his traumatic incident. And he must feel comfortable and confident with the job before he actually returns to his normal duties. And one final point, that if an officer is tentative, if he does return to work too early, and he's still perhaps physically unsure of himself, mentally unsure of himself, he can't go back out on the street at that particular time and put himself in the same position. Because if he is tentative, and if he does go back out too early and he's not ready for it, it could possibly cost him his own life, the life of another officer, or perhaps the life of a citizen.
All right, Gordon, thank you very much for that. And I think you really made some excellent points there. A couple of them in particular comes to mind is that you were incapacitated, but that you had the instinct to continue on and stay a part of that situation. You said you were shouting orders to the agents that were there, the other law enforcement officers that were there, and also a few of the other things that you said concerning your attitude, your personal behavior, recognizing that the sensitivity, the contribution that the organization tries to make, and the importance of that to you and to your family. And I thank you very much for coming on the program today and for sharing that. And I would like to especially thank him for coming on the air, because yesterday was his birthday. He spent it here with us, and I think he'd probably rather have been with his family, but thank you very much. Now, we're going to get back to you in a couple of minutes. We'll also get back to you with some more questions right after our next presenter. But first, I want to remind you again that next Wednesday, October 19th, we have our second teleconference this month. It'll be on crisis management, the Atlanta and Oakdale prison sieges. It'll be on SpaceNet 1, Transponder 4, Channel 7. That's a different channel than we're on today. Our speakers are the FBI agents who are in charge of the FBI's responsibilities at both of those prisons, and also the Federal Bureau of Prison officials in charge of the Bureau of Prison responsibilities. We're going to also present the development of a crisis management plan. Now remember, that's next Wednesday at the usual time, 12 to 3 Eastern Time and 11 to 2 Central Time. I want to remind you also that on December 14th, our teleconference will be on the 9mm pistol issues and training rather than organizational communication. A 9mm pistol is a matter of high importance to many law enforcement agencies, and that we think we have an obligation to address this topic as soon as possible. So we'll reschedule managing through organizational communication for later on. Now also next Wednesday on October 19th, we're going to announce our 1989 schedule of topics and also the dates for those teleconferences here on LESTN. Okay, our next presenter is John Gray, a special agent with the FBI who's assigned to our Academy Firearms Training Unit as an instructor. He entered on duty with the FBI, excuse me, in 1971, and he received his appointment as a special agent in August of 1980. His current duties include teaching officer safety, techniques and mechanics of arrest, tactics and safety in felony stops and firearms. Prior to his assignment at the Academy in 1987, he served in the Indianapolis, Kansas City, and New York City FBI field divisions. He served as a resident agent in the Garden City, Kansas FBI office, and also on a joint FBI New York City Police Department terrorist task force. John also conducts assessments of shooting incidents involving FBI agents. As a regular part of his responsibilities at the FBI Academy, now, he's a resident of Indiana, and he received his bachelor's degree from Indiana University. With that in mind, and with what we've heard so far, John, the emphasis is going to be on what we do to build that reaction into us and what we can do and should be doing in preparing ourselves so that we can meet crisis situations. With that in mind, John, go ahead.
Thank you, Les. I really appreciate the fact of being on the panel with such a fine group of guys. The incident you saw at the beginning of the show was probably the catalyst for more changes in the FBI training program than anything before in the FBI's history. I think our research has shown, and our National Law Enforcement Training Needs Assessment has constantly asked for more training in the area of officer survival, officer safety, officer awareness, if you will. The Bureau's response, the FBI response, has been basically twofold to date. The first of which is a continuing crime study by our Uniform Crime Reporting Office up at headquarters. Ed Davis and Jim Vaugh of FBI headquarters are out there interviewing police felons who have killed police officers. This is an in-depth study done in 1987, and again, it is ongoing. Secondly, the training division has established, or is currently establishing, a curriculum to be offered to local law enforcement throughout the country concerning officer awareness and officer survival. Regarding the ongoing research by FBI headquarters, what we are dealing with here was research conducted throughout the country, and it was done in 1987. I think the facts that I'm going to about to relate to you are kind of startling, and it does have a direct impact on the training within your departments. This 1987 study consisted of the interview of 21 felons convicted of killing 24 police officers. 19 of them were male, and 2 of them were female. The study revealed the following points, which in fact directly impact on you in the law enforcement community, but especially in your training areas. Of the felons interviewed, none of the felons thought about the consequences of their actions, their escape, or any punishment that they might receive. Of the incidents, 18 of 21 were drug or alcohol related. Regarding the victim officers, 1/3 of the officers, on their last performance rating, it had been the same as it had been throughout their entire career. 1/3 of the officers who were killed, their last performance rating, in fact, had a drop in performance quality just prior to the shooting incident. 1/3 of the officers, of the victim officers, had no performance rating available. As far as procedures utilized by those victim officers at the time of the confrontation, 75% or 20 of the victim officers did make serious procedural errors. 2 had made no procedural errors, and 2 were strictly circumstantial in the judgment of the interviewing agents. They were simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. Regarding training of the victim officers, 21 of the officers, or 87%, did have formal training in the area of firearms and tactical considerations. 13%, or 3, had no formal training whatsoever by their departments prior to the shooting incident. Additionally, interviews with the felons revealed that 55%, or 11 of the felons, stated that they intended to kill the police officer, if necessary, at the point of confrontation, and they had made that decision well in advance of being confronted by the police. 6 of the interviewed felons had no prior arrest record. 9 had been shot at or fired upon previously, either earlier in their life or by another police officer, and they stated that if confronted, they were in fact determined not to let it happen again. Of particular note regarding training, 13 of the felons interviewed, 13 of the felons interviewed were in fact accompanied by other individuals at the time that they were confronted. 7 of these 13 were not the focus of police attention. I think here we need to look at stressing in police training the fact that when you go out to arrest an individual, you must maintain the perimeter awareness. You must be aware of individuals who are with the subject you're going out there to arrest, because 7 of these 13 people were not the focus of the arrest, and they in fact killed the police officers. Concerning weapon selection and preparation for a confrontation, from the firearm standpoint, it was interesting to note that 8 subjects carried guns all the time, either on a vehicle or in a vehicle or on their person. They carried the weapons all the time. Further, they practiced all the time firing those weapons. 7 subjects were very familiar with their weapon, and they carried simply what they wanted. They were very confident with their weapon choice. You should consider within law enforcement that the act of arresting someone, approaching an individual for the simple act of arresting someone, is probably the most dangerous act that you will come upon in your career. One can never allow yourself to become complacent, to simply fall into a mode of being routine. You must never allow your duties to become routine. Widely accepted within the law enforcement community, and especially interest in the training field, is that triangle of officer safety preparation. That basically being the mental preparation, the physical preparation, and the firearms and tactical preparation, each side being equal. Often overlooked during training, but perhaps the most important point of the triangle in an officer's mental preparation is the fact that you must instill within your officers mental awareness of their environment. We use a color-coded condition in this, the first of which is condition white. Condition white, quite simply, is you are relaxed, but you are unaware
of external factors of your environment. You're unprepared to deal in this stage with a confrontation. Most police officers killed after investigation turns out that they were basically in the condition white mode. They were unaware of external factors of their environment. Condition yellow is the next step. In this condition, you can in fact be relaxed, but you are aware of what's going on around you. You're mentally alert to stimuli of your surroundings. You scan your areas of responsibility for potential danger signals. The next step that you might accelerate into is condition orange. Then you become specifically alert to a particular area, subject, or condition as a possible threat. As Bob stated earlier, pick up on the physical signs, the body language, if you will, of someone carrying a gun. Pick up upon these things in condition orange. Once you enter condition orange, your mental trigger is set in motion. You've got to develop the if-then thinking, because you can readily accelerate into condition red, this of course being the fight and confrontation mode. You will have a reflex response in this mode. You act in this mode directly from the confrontation, respond by reflecting upon your training, simply the training that you've received previously. Under stress, it'll become fight or flight. Basically, we anticipate your reactions to be either number one, panic, or number two, do the last conscious thought prior to entering condition red. Or you will, in fact, respond to what you've been trained to do. Now, I must point out that the situations often that we studied, confrontations, would fluctuate between condition orange to condition red, then maybe decelerate back to condition orange, and then readily again back to condition red. Once you face a confrontation, an officer will react the way they have been trained. The direct survival of the officer will simply be their previous experience, their preparation, training, professionalism, basically planning in their own self-discipline. Physical fitness at the time of the confrontation becomes critical because it's widely accepted within the law enforcement community that full physical output, your physical energy output, is limited to about 30 seconds. Even officers who are in excellent physical condition are normally limited to 30 seconds of full physical output, and then it will obviously, or I shouldn't say obviously, it will logically perhaps respond in a deadly force mode. Firearms training to complete the triangle. Under stress of a gunfight, you revert to automatic pilot. You revert back to what you've learned on the range. We learned in the Newhall incident in California where the officer was killed with brass in his hand. Why? Because instinctively we had taught for decades, you catch your brass on the range and throw it in the bucket. That, of course, had been changed in firearms training, and now we emphasize, for example, especially after the Miami incident, realizing we hit this subject several times and he kept coming at us. We now train instead of, for example, 2 rounds on the target and then reholstering automatically on the completed course. Agents at the Academy are now staying on target. You assess the situation. The weapon stays at eye level. You maintain the worst-case scenario. You maintain visual on the subject, even though you might, in fact, have hit him. You assess the situation, and only on the range do you reholster after the instructor tells you to. What we'd like to get away from, because we have had some shooting incidents where agents have fired 2 rounds in a gunfight and simply reholstered while the subject was still firing at them. We've got to get out of that type of a training mode. We're lucky at the FBI Academy regarding scenarios and training and protocol and arrest scenarios. We have a realistic situation there called the town of Hogan. Within it, agent trainees and in-service classes that come to the Academy are exposed to potential confrontations within this realistic setting. It is under these realistic conditions that trainees learn the elements of safety, their safety, the innocent party's safety, and of course the subject's safety. And of course of control, subject control, controlling the arrest site, and self-discipline or self-control. Trainees learn in a setting in which they learn from their mistakes in a very safe environment. In order to increase survival potential in the area of physical fitness, an agency must consider 3 things to establish within their program. In the physical training mode, departments in the audience should probably consider at least 3 basic things. Establish an ongoing physical fitness program. Also have a physical awareness program where they are tested periodically. We in the FBI have 2 physical tests twice a year, in the spring and the fall, in which we have to maintain a particular level of physical fitness. You must monitor it constantly. Consider also on-duty or regular scheduled training. We in the FBI, of course, have 3 hours that we can devote to physical fitness as actual on-duty hours. You might want to consider that within your departments. Proper physical fitness not only ensures the health of your officers and their continued on-duty status, and also helps out in the area of injury and liability that you alluded to, Sean. If they're in good physical condition, perhaps they can avoid the injury and end the confrontation. It also helps to improve your mental clarity that I spoke of earlier. You've got to maintain that mental awareness and have that mental clarity at the time you are confronted. If you're in good physical condition, your mind is normally clearer than someone who is extremely out of shape. Regarding firearms training, the trend in law enforcement today, of course, is to go with a handgun of an increased capacity of rounds. In other words, like a 9mm semi-automatic handgun versus the standard 6-shot revolver that is still out there in law enforcement. The emphasis of an agency or department, however, in firearms training should not only be on the type of weapon you carry, but in stress-related tactical shooting under realistic conditions. For example, moving targets, partial targets, dim and low light conditions, multiple targets, etc. Regardless of whatever weapon you choose to carry or issue to your officers. Realistic conditions, stress-related situations, of course basic marksmanship, but also combat courses, as we call them, stress-related courses, shoot, don't shoot scenarios. You must require fundamental qualification to your officers within the department. This qualification requirement is normally simply a walk in a straight line course where you shoot at a target that doesn't move, you see the whole target, and it's easy to walk down and score those hits. As Gordon can, I think, relate to you, in a realistic gunfight situation like Miami, you cannot recreate on a range in a training scenario the being able not to see your target, the fact that the subject is moving, the confusion of responding to a situation like that. It's difficult in a training mode to recreate that setting. However, I think if you, as we have done in the FBI, stress the combat courses, the stress-related courses currently in the FBI, you can improve the survivability of your officers. Try to get away from, once they are fundamentally qualified, get into more realistic scenarios, which would relate directly to a confrontation on the street. Since the incident in Miami, involving the agents in Miami on April 11th, we have increased the weaponry to our agents in the field. We purchased Sig Sauer P226 9mm semi-automatic handguns, which have been issued to our special weapons and tactics teams and our special operations group. We also purchased for our agents in the street for street agent usage, and in fact have them on the street, not leave them in the gun vaults in the offices, the Heckler & Koch, the H&K MP5 single-fire carbine version. This is a very good weapon, very low recoil, very easy to train, and also has a high degree of accuracy up to 100 yards. We also purchased numerous Remington 870 shotguns. We had the 14-inch barrel shotgun in the FBI since the early 1970s. However, we purchased many, many more, and it is now the standard shotgun of the FBI, the 14-inch barrel. Why did we cut off the 4 inches of the barrel? Simply weapon accessibility. I believe Gordon can relate to you. Being able to get to your shotgun in a confrontation, and being able to carry it discreetly within a vehicle. The 14-inch barrel is a lot easier to do that with. We are going to be going to, for example, roof rack shotguns. That 14-inch barrel shotgun will be mounted above the head of the FBI agent in his car on certain reactive squads. More importantly, I think within the last few weeks, the director of the FBI, Mr. Sessions, has authorized agents of the FBI to purchase their own 9mm handgun, either a Smith & Wesson or a Sig Sauer, if they can meet the criteria and the requirement to qualify with it. They must go through a 3-day transitional training program, and then, of course, have it approved by the FBI for personal carry. Not all agents have to. It's not a requirement, but I believe a lot of the agents have currently gone through the program, and there will be a transitional training to 9mm semi-automatic handgun. Why is that? Because easier to reload. As Gordon can relate to you, one of the most devastating times of a gunfight for Gordon, I believe, was the realization you had fired your 6 rounds, your strong hand was hit, and now you have the problem of trying to, with one hand, unload and reload the revolver while the rounds are still coming at you. With a semi-automatic, it is much easier. We also train currently in the FBI and stress with our new agents tactical loading. Loading and looking. You've got to be able to load your weapon and glance to see the area to make sure that the subject is not coming around the car to get at you. And as I alluded to in the Miami incident, we learned 3 of our agents took direct hits in their strong hand, either on the weapon or within their strong hand. We had mentioned it in the FBI training previously about one-hand, weak hand, unloading and reloading a revolver. And it's not an easy thing to do, as I think Gordon can attest to. But we've got to train people how to do that so that under stress they can react. Also, weak hand only shooting. I think a lot of departments train their officers to simply practice the course with their strong hand only shooting. But as we learned in Miami with 3 of the agents involved, the agents had to utilize their weak hand. For example, mine's my right. I had to utilize my weak hand, my left hand. You have to learn to shoot with that in case your strong hand takes a hit, because the focus of being hit in your strong hand. Emphasis in training must also include an awareness, awareness of the trainees, the agents of the officers that you have with your department, of the effects that they can expect if they are confronted with a violent confrontation. They've got to be made aware of what they might be going through at the time that they are confronted. Along that area, responses to stress, there will be an increased adrenaline flow, the results of which will be increased strength, increased pain tolerance, or loss of a fine motor function. A trembling or loss of fine muscle control may in fact be one reaction. Secondly, tunnel vision may develop, thereby increasing the danger of threats in your area of peripheral vision. You've got to be able to be aware of things in the response area of the confrontation. Thirdly, tunnel hearing may be a possibility. It's referred to as auditory exclusion. It is the inability to hear commands, directions, or warnings. This can be very devastating. Additionally, the inability to keep the mental clarity in a confrontation. As to reason, you may, if you're involved in a confrontation, lose that logical progression of events. Things may be totally out of control in your own mind. Finally, the inability to judge distance or time. Often in a confrontation, there'll be a distortion of reality. You may, in fact, have a speeding up or a slow motion effect within your own mind as to what is going on around you. Training must emphasize to all agents and officers that also, if you are wounded, you are not necessarily going to die. You've got to establish within your departments and your officers a strong survival awareness. Michael Platt in the Miami shooting incident was hit a total of 13 times, 2 of which were non-survivable wounds early on. Our agents were killed basically by a man who was dead. The man didn't realize he was dead. He had a will to survive, as we try to teach police officers. Realize that your subject may not go down. The only way to immediately incapacitate your subject is to have a direct hit in the central nervous system, the brain, or the spinal cord, and destroy it. Otherwise, the subject can continue the fight and continue to harm you. In conclusion, I would simply state that agents or officers must be given training which fosters and enhances this survival awareness. There must be a strong survival awareness throughout your entire department, and you must stress that to your officers not only at the time of recruit training, but throughout the entire career. I think the study that you had pointed out earlier, Sean, about officers who are injured or get involved in confrontations are early on or towards the late part of their career. And I think I alluded to the fact that maybe there's a bell curve involved there. Agents and officers may be confronted early in their career and they respond accordingly. Then as they get more experience, more confidence, if you will, they'll react. Towards the end of their career, I think if they haven't been to firearms training and repeated that training, they may in fact enter that panic mode or respond improperly. So I would stress to you in the audience, if you're going to have a training program within your departments on survival training, make sure everyone attends. Not only the seasoned officer who's been on duty or the rookie officer straight out of the academy, but also your managers. You've got to have your managerial involvement in these survival training programs because, as Gordon alluded to, in some departments, they are going to be the ones handling the investigation in those situations. I think training is a key factor. I have been in some areas of the country where a department was only issued 50 rounds a year, for example, in firearms training. I would like to note that during the Miami shooting, we found out later through investigation that Michael Platt, the subject, one of the 2 subjects of the case, had purchased 5,000 rounds of ammunition for that Ruger Mini 14. And it can be documented that he was firing over 500 rounds a week out in the Everglades. If you've got officers in your department who are firing 50 rounds a year with a handgun, and we've got guys out there that are firing 500 rounds a week, when we talk about street survival, I think we have to concern ourselves with ensuring we have a training program within the firearms area with all departments.
All right, well, thank you very much, John. We will start your questions now, so if you have questions that you'd like to ask any of the panelists at this time, now's the time for you to start dialing so that we can take those calls. We'll take your questions just as soon as you get through. Do any of you have anything you want to ask John or add to John's presentation right now? Gordon?
If you just make one point and add to what John said about physical conditioning and also to what Sean said earlier in the program, two doctors told me in the hospital that if I wasn't in the excellent physical condition that I was through basically a lifetime regimen of jogging, swimming, and weightlifting, that I would not have lived. I would have pumped out by the time I'd gotten to the hospital, and I would have died. And they told me, just make sure that you know and your fellow officers know that being in shape saved your life.
I think that's excellent to attest to the need to have physical training, ongoing physical training like you mentioned, John. And it's not something that's a luxury for a department. That's a necessity for a department, just like firearms training is a necessity. I think there was one other aspect to that I can relate to with Bob. Being in good physical condition also means good mental condition, too. Alertness and awareness, which is what you're talking about, Bob, when you're talking about watching that subject's nonverbal behavior so you can detect these unusual things. And I think that people who are experts in this area of physical fitness tell you there's a high correlation between physical fitness, being alert mentally as well. Now, we're going to take your calls, and we will get to those in just a second. But first of all, Bob, I wonder if you'd do one other thing for me. Now, you talked about having the weapon on the inside of the clothing, a shirt over top. You gave us a demonstration yesterday that I think was really unique, a slight thing that maybe some of us pass over. What happens when a garment, when a weapon is inside a pocket, a heavy weapon inside a pocket? There are certain things that happen. If you're wearing a waist-length jacket or if you're wearing three-quarter length or a suit jacket. Can you show us what that is, Bob?
Sure,
Would you?
But basically what I was showing you was that often if guns aren't carried in the waistband, they're carried in the pocket of the jacket, especially in the weather where it's a little colder. And it's very easy to spot, especially when the coat is open, a gun that's carried concealed in a pocket. First, obviously, look for a protrusion in the pocket, but that's not often easy to see because we're dealing with small guns in large army coats and other large ski jackets, etc. But no matter how small the jacket, how small the gun, nor how large the jacket is, believe me when I tell you, it's easy if you train yourself to spot it if the jacket's open. First of all, there's the obvious, the jacket hanging down on that one side. You can see this very easily from the front, if it's buttoned very easily from the front or from the rear, where it should be flat across at the button. But a more easy sign to look for is when the subject is walking, and it's in this manner. The fabric in the jacket, no matter from a windbreaker to an army coat, on the side that the gun is not in the pocket, is going to stay with the front of the body as you stride on that side. As such, from the bottom of the jacket to the top, it's going to stay in the front of the body. On the side that the gun has a pocket which has a weapon in it, that the coat has a pocket which has a weapon in it, that side, or the side of the jacket, is going to temporarily stay still while the leg clears first the fabric. It'll then play a swinging or pendulum-style catch-up with the next stride on the opposite thing. And I might demonstrate it to you. There's a 38, but you see it just as visibly with a 25 or a little 22 automatic in a light jacket like this, or a heavy army jacket. On the side there's no gun in, the fabric stays from the bottom to the top as I stride forward. The first step with the side that the gun is secreted in, as you see, the leg and hip clear the fabric of the coat.
The weight of the gun holding that coat down.
The weight of the gun holds it still while the leg and the fabric clears. Now, as you watch a man walk, it'll become more visible, especially in a heavier gun, because the swinging will be more profound, and the pendulum-style swinging will be even more easy to see. But again, the side that The weapon isn't on, the fabric stays on the leg and on the chest. Beside there is a gun secreted in the pocket. The leg and hip will clear that area before catching up on the next stride with the opposite leg.
That's very interesting, Bob, and thank you very much for the demonstration. Okay. Going to get back to some more questions in a little while, but I think we've got a call right now. This is from Sergeant David Headings with the Kalamazoo, Michigan Police Department. Dave, if you're on the air, go ahead with your question.
Yes, I'm calling from Lake Michigan College, and we're watching your program, and we find it very interesting. It's a multi-group of police officers from southwestern Michigan that are observing the program. But I'd like to address my statement to Mr. Grennan. We're having a little difficulty here as far as his statistics. Now, I'm not going to argue with his statistics, because they may very well be very accurate, but we're having difficulty with his conclusions on a lot of things on here. I think that it should be noted we don't agree with him in the fact that his conclusions about animal shootings and also about the number of shootings that an officer may be involved in, to automatically state that you have a problem officer because he's involved in numerous shootings. Most officers don't even fire their weapons once, but you do on occasion have officers that are in multi-shootings during their career. It appears to us that the things that he's brought to light are things that an administrator would be most interested in, but doesn't seem to help us, the street officer, except perhaps the statistics are interesting in compiling them for types of training. Just want to let you know that we're not in agreement with the conclusions, though we're not arguing with the statistics.
Okay, before I ask Sean to respond to that very briefly, I think we have to realize that we are talking about that there are some exceptions to any conclusions that you draw, and you did mention that the statistics may speak for themselves. But briefly, Sean, do you want to address that just very briefly?
I agree with the fact that there is a possibility of having an officer out on the street who's been involved in 3 or 4 shootings, maybe 5 or 6 shootings. But I feel that the department should look upon this officer and not just continually put him back out in the street after each shooting without giving him some type of psychological testing to see if he's fit for duty. Unless we test these people properly, we could be creating a monster here in policing to put somebody out in the street that has that many shootings. And I'll go as far as to say to you that in some of the assault incidents, in fact, 2 of the people involved in assault incidents, which I didn't show or discuss today, were involved in 8 shootings. Now, I have a big problem with an officer who's been involved in 8 shootings. And I think any police executive or police supervisor should have the same problem. Some sort of background has to be done on that officer, and after each shooting, he should have been tested in some way, psychologically, to find out, especially after 3 or 4 shootings. It's not impossible to be involved in a number of shootings. I was involved in 2 myself, but I think after 3 or 4 shootings, the time has come to analyze that officer a little more thoroughly. We do not want to put John Wayne out in the street as a member of our department.
Okay, Dave, I hope that at least answers part of your question for you.
Thank you, and I understand, I appreciate what he's saying about the post-shooting trauma, the critical incidents that the officers are in, and the preparation that must be made as far as the statistics are concerned. They're helpful in that regard. I don't disagree with that. It's just a lot of the conclusions that we do disagree with. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your question, too. Next question is from a special agent, Supervisory Special Agent Butch Morris with the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. Go ahead with your question, Butch.
John, we're just curious on this end. After the Miami shooting, has the FBI agents or units considered, or are they going to use the .45 caliber weapon?
That is under consideration. The FBI does not have a issue weapon for 9mm. We've only been recently authorized to carry 9mm semi-automatic handguns. Under consideration, of course, when we issue weapons will be, of course, .45 caliber. We had a ballistics seminar, terminal ballistics. We were concerned after the Miami incident, how can a man who has 13 hits on him, 2 of which are non-survivable, kill 2 of our agents? So we conducted a terminal ballistics seminar bringing in authorities in the area, pathologists and criminologists and so forth, and we were going 9mm versus .45, and at that time when we purchased the Sig Sauer 9mm, it was because the decision was made for a higher magazine capacity due to the fact that a new round that's out currently with Winchester, Olin Corporation, jacketed soft lead hollow point, 147 grain subsonic round it's called, would have acted perhaps better than our 9mm silver tip hollow point in the Miami incident. .45, however, to make it concise, the doctors that we came back to the terminal ballistics, their basic comment to make it very clear is bigger is better, but you get 8 shots in the magazine versus 14, 15, depending upon the weapon you choose otherwise. I'm not going to rule out that the duty-issued semi-automatic in the future of the FBI may, in fact, be a .45. I can't say that today.
Okay, Butch, thanks for your question. I hope that answers it for you.
Very much.
We're going to take some more calls in just a minute, but our teleconferences are intended to supplement ongoing training needs, your ongoing training needs. Now, many of you have told me that you copy the teleconference and you use it for that purpose, ongoing training. I hope so. But if you have the capacity to do so, please do so. I hope you also take advantage of the tapes that we show you that other agencies have shared over LESTN. We're copying our teleconference tapes onto the European and Asian format for use by law enforcement agencies in those areas. I might add that we're doing that too at their request, so somebody's getting the message to them. Australia and some other areas have also asked how they can join in receiving LESTN broadcasts. Now, I think that's confirmation that LESTN is recognized as a legitimate, useful network to law enforcement. If you do need to obtain a copy of this or any past teleconference, here's a message about how you can do that.
LESTN viewers are encouraged to videotape our programs for use by their own agencies. However, if you've missed a program and need a copy, half-inch VHS tapes are available. To obtain order forms, send a request on your agency's letterhead stationery to LESTN, care of KCPD Video Seminar Unit, 3201 Southwest Traffic Way, Kansas City, Missouri, 64111. The order form will contain a list of available programs and purchasing information. Please allow 6 to 8 weeks for order deliveries.
Okay, we have a question now from Chief L.R. Rice with the New Albin, Iowa Police Department. Go ahead, you're on the air, Chief.
Yes, thank you. My question, I guess, would be to the first presenter. The statistics that he was giving, those were established from 1983, is that correct?
Yes, they were.
Okay. I would assume then at that time the semi-auto was not specifically more or less the duty weapon of most of the officers that were involved, but in this discharge of the firearms of the other type, not in an actual shooting incident where someone else was involved, were these revolver or semi-auto related? And do you have any information since these were compiled as to, with the departments going now to more the semi-auto direction, are these incidents of discharge now going down?
No, the department will, as far as I understand, will never go to a semi-automatic weapon. On duty or off duty, they do not want you to carry anything other than the .38 revolver. The incident I mentioned were 2 officers, and one had bought that on his own. In other words, an officer can have as many guns as he wants, but he has to carry a .38 on and off duty unless the department allows him to carry a semi-automatic gun. The only officers allowed to carry semi-automatics would be basically narcotics officers or officers that are working undercover. And therefore, they are the only officers that are trained to handle semi-automatic weapons. No uniform officer or detective, unless specially assigned, is trained to handle a semi-automatic weapon. And that's why this incident basically took place. But there are very few incidents, accidental shootings involving semi-automatic weapons. My personal opinion is that I feel the semi-automatic weapon is probably a better weapon for a police officer to have because basically it's easier to load than a revolver. And I recall several incidents in New York as incidents the FBI had. One was Scott Goodell, who was killed in New York City while he was reloading his revolver, and the opponent had a 14 or 15 shot 9mm and killed him. So I'm in agreement. I think most departments should go with a semi-automatic gun.
Well, I think the feeling, especially in this area of the Midwest, is that there are a lot of departments that have either gone or are considering going to the semi-automatic because of the rural type situation of which we're in with a 1-2-man department where backup might be quite a ways away. And this would give us a little more firepower as opposed to the 6-shot revolver and the 12 rounds in the speed loaders. So I thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Chief. Next call is from Sergeant Dave Roof from the Nashville Metro PD. Go ahead, Dave, you're on the air.
Yes, I'd like to address this to either Agent Gordon or Agent Gray. Maybe they could tell me what would they have done different in regards to stopping the moving vehicle known to contain the 2 felony suspects. And then the other question is, would the shotgun slugs have made a difference in the shooting situation down there?
Okay, Dave, thank you for your question. Gordon, do you want to answer that one?
No, go ahead, John.
If I get the gist of your question, it's basically what would we have done differently. In the situation that Gordon was in Miami with the guys, they had seen them loading the long-barreled weapon. The anticipation and perception was that they were going to go out on South Dixie Highway and we would have had a shootout in a high public visibility on the U.S. Highway 1. Prior to the Miami incident, I would state to you that vehicle stop training within the FBI was basically with compliant car stops. SWAT teams, of course, throughout the FBI have always been trained in non-compliant car stops, but the training itself was not there. Part of the team out there that day were SWAT trained. However, they picked the best spot that they could, and that we had 2 concrete walls and a dead-end driveway, and that was the plan, was to force them off into that. What in fact happened was an accident, and nobody could have perceived the things that were set in motion by the impact of the vehicles. You must remember that Mr. Maddox, the driver of the black Monte Carlo, was in fact the individual who set the thing in motion with the impact into the bureau car of Jay Camlin and Ed Morales. And then what ensued after that was a continuous chain of events. As far as utilization of the shotgun, Gordon, when we were making the videotape firefight, alluded to the fact that had he been able to utilize that shotgun on the back seat from a distance of 5 to 7 feet, while both subjects were still seated in the vehicle, yes, we would have had a different outcome, which is a key factor in weapon accessibility. You've got to have the weapons readily accessible under the gunfight situation.
If I could just add a little bit to that, it was mentioned by a number of people that probably the only way that we could have avoided what happened out there on April 11th, 1986 was if we didn't go to work that day. And I would like to point out that what we did run into out there that day was every law enforcement officer's nightmare. We ran into 2 guys who were not afraid to give up their own life. They weren't afraid to die. These 2 individuals, I know as law enforcement officers, we've heard it 1,000 times, I won't give up, I won't be taken alive. These individuals had told their associates that if they ever got stopped, if they ever got pulled over, it was going to be Custer's last stand, and it truly was.
Okay, I hope that answers your question for you. How's that?
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you for your call. Okay, on our next teleconference, which is next Wednesday, October 19th, 12 to 3 Eastern Time, 11 to 2 Central Time, we'll announce our 1989 schedule and the dates of our broadcasts. That teleconference, once again, will be on SpaceNet 1, Transponder 4, Channel 7, on December 14th.
Now, on December 14th, our teleconference will be on the 9mm pistol issues and training. Okay, please use this information for scheduling your teleconference attendance. Please remember also to report your attendance figures and your viewing site information to your nearest FBI office. Now, that information should be given to the police training coordinator. Also, you'll be receiving our new form, which you should return to me at the enclosed address. Now, I know that's double reporting, but the information you're giving us serves two purposes. Okay, with that in mind, I'd like Sean to return to you once more, and there was a statistic that you wanted to cover that you said you didn't get to cover thoroughly enough. You wanted to make one last comment about that, and then if we have some more calls, we'll take some more calls.
Well, basically, I'd like to get back to the question that was just proposed to me from Michigan. When I look at that figure, there was actually 301 incidents and 93 accidental shootings. In 40 reports that were filed, the officer did not check off whether or not he had a prior shooting incident. So we only know of 301 incidents, and we know 93 had prior shooting incidents. So the possibility is there that possibly 100 of the shooters had prior shooting incidents. It is possible, as I stated before, to have an officer out in the street. But after each shooting, he has to be tested psychologically, receive some sort of psychological assistance. I know from my experience, I had very bad feelings after the 2 shootings I was involved in. I never received any psychological assistance, and all I did was go before, right after the shooting, a board of supervisors who questioned what I did. I don't think any of those people had any idea what it was like to be involved in a shooting.